what were some rules or regulations that you guys think would be a good thing to have? All right. So, and if you want to read your punishments or whatever, that's fine as well. You don't have to. But I think we're going to find that for many of us, this is going to be there's going to be some similarities. Okay. So, Lindsay, why don't you start us off? What's one rule? So yesterday, again, we talked about governments. We talked about the economies of this kind of scenario. What are some rules you think we should all live by in this situation? What's one? Go ahead.
Well, one of the most important things I think is, I'm guessing that since they're on the island, that there are probably animals that they can hunt. So I put don't overkill animals, like only take what you need. Because you don't want to kill all the animals and then have no food.
Okay, good. That's a really good rule. Don't take any more than you need. Because there are limited resources. And by the way, if some of you are struggling to come up with one, go ahead and start stealing, right? If maybe you came up with 3, but you couldn't come up with 5, that would be a good one, right? Because you know that there's only a specific amount of resources, a finite amount of resources on this particular area, and we don't want to waste those. Which, by the way, is very interesting you bring that up, because ironically, does our own government somewhat put similar restrictions on this? Are there environmental regulations in the United States? Yes, absolutely. So it's interesting you bring that up, because our government, in fact, does indeed do that. Maybe not to the extent you're talking about, but do they put restrictions on business and things like that in the hopes of conserving the environment up to a certain extent? Yes, right? They put restrictions on water pollution, air pollution, things of that nature. So that's a really, really good example. All right, Aiden, what else?
No touching of the hair, but no stealing or taking other people's possessions.
Okay, so no stealing, which is interesting that you would bring that up, because in communism, everybody would own everything together. So really, who are you stealing from? Yeah, you're stealing kind of from everybody. It's not a crime against one person. If you said communism would be the best way to go, you're actually stealing from everybody, which maybe makes the offense even more serious. So interesting, okay? So no stealing. No stealing, okay? Logan, what'd you say?
Treason.
Okay, how do you define treason?
Trying to overthrow the society.
Okay, so maybe rebellion. I mean, we all decided that we were going to be in this together, and if we're going to be in it together, then we need to be in it together. Okay, absolutely. All right, good. What else? Yes, please, Tori.
No murder.
Absolutely. How about murder? Yeah. Right. And by the way, in some states, what's the punishment? I mean, even today, what's the punishment for that? Yeah, you kill someone, we'll kill you right back. Right? Now, that's a very controversial idea, to be honest. There are some people who feel that the death penalty should be outlawed, right? That otherwise we're sinking to the murderer's standards. But to kind of think about this, the federal government just executed somebody about 3 weeks ago.
Who was it?
I don't even remember the guy's name. Do you guys remember the Boston Marathon bomber? You guys remember that with the Boston Marathon? They set up those pipe bombs and all that other stuff. One guy was killed in a shootout, but they took his brother, not hostage. They arrested him. Yeah, help him being held hostage. That's what happened to me last weekend. I wasn't arrested. I was held hostage. Just kidding. I was never arrested. I've never been arrested. Just for point of reference. But they arrested this guy, and I just saw on MSN this morning that they are going to charge him not only with obviously murder, but they're going to seek the death penalty.
Isn't there one in South Dakota last school year?
Yes, first one in years.
Yeah.
A long time.
A prisoner killed a guard who was about to retire, so it was necessary.
Correct. Actually, I can say this because he's passed away. That man was one of my wife's patients. He was one of her heart patients. So he's super nice guy, the guard that died. So yeah, you're absolutely right. They did last year, and before that, I think it was 5-6 years. Yeah. I mean, we're not like Texas. Texas basically has like a waiting room, and then they just usher people in to kill them. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, because it's Texas. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. By the way, we'll talk more about this later. But what also is kind of fascinating to think about is Some states have outlawed the death penalty. Some states still allow it, but they just only allow specific kinds of murder. No, let me phrase it, murder. They only have specific kinds of the death penalty. Like, for example, you can't hang people to death anymore. That's considered cruel and unusual. So like back in the Old West days, that's how they would do it. They would just hang people, right? Shortly after that, they would use firing squad.
And the guillotine.
Well, yeah, actually, the last person to be killed by the guillotine in France was actually in 1970. Way more recent than what you might think. Yeah. So there's, the death penalty is legal in most states, but the way in which those people are killed has changed a little bit based on the 8th Amendment. And again, that's something we'll talk about here later. Interesting. Good. So no murder. And if you do, we might just kill you right back. I don't know how you do that on an island, whether you throw coconuts at them until they die, or I don't know how that would work, but it could be interesting to think about. Any other rules, laws that you think everybody in the group should follow? We're gonna go Copel and then Jay, okay?
I said everyone has to take like an inventory every night in order to keep track of like other things.
Okay, so everybody needs to have like a task. Everybody needs to pull their weight. They need to do a job, right? It's interesting you bring this up because somebody did that first period too. And it reminds me, I'm looking for my Rising Scholars people, a couple of you. It reminds me of what happened with John Smith at Jamestown, where he uttered the famous phrase, "He that shall not work shall not eat." Right? There's no such thing as a free lunch here, man. If you want to be in this society, you got to pull your weight, right? So maybe everybody has to have some sort of role within the society, within this group, okay? There's no such thing as a free lunch. You're not skating by. You need to help out too. All right, Jay?
No cannibalism.
Wow, that was really specific. Yeah, okay, no cannibalism. Not only is it bad to murder people, it's bad to eat them too. That's generally frowned upon. Like we're with the Donner Party or something, right? Donner Party table of two. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, in desperate situations, that might be, a thought, unless you're really mentally disturbed, and that might be your thought all the time. Hello, Jeffrey Dahmer. But that's definitely something that I would vote on that. I would say yes. I agree with that. No cannibalism. Eating people is a bad idea. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Any other rules, laws? Yeah, please, Lindsay.
I was kind of thinking of like only a certain amount of water and food for certain people, but like with older people and children, it'd probably be more.
Mm-hmm.
But like with people who are in fine health and stuff like that, they would have like maybe like 1 or 2 bottles of water.
Okay, so maybe think about rationing our food and water. Yeah, okay, good. Again, making sure that it's sustainable. Kind of a modern word, right? Making sure it's sustainable, making sure it lasts. Good. Okay. All right. So overall, these are some ideas of some rules, some laws that that societies might agree upon. And in this particular situation, in a small group, that's definitely something to think about. So here's what I want you to do. First of all, you can close your lids, put them away, and you'll see that I have provided for you some guided notes. Now, this is actually mutually beneficial. Number one, it's beneficial for me because I know exactly what you're doing and it's not playing a game or going on the internet or doing something you're not supposed to be doing, looking at you particularly. Yeah, that's right. The second thing, though, is that the way it benefits you, of course, is, number one, it's educational psychology. It's better to actually write it down rather than type it. But also, you're not having to write down everything. It allows you to focus on exactly what I want you to know, and you're not going to kill your hand in the process. Cool? Mutually beneficial. It's good stuff. Okay. So this last activity with the crash scenario basically was trying to somewhat, to a certain extent, really, mimic the United States. Once we defeated the British after the Revolutionary War, we could do whatever we wanted. We could have created any government we wanted. We could have created any economy we wanted. We could have done whatever we want. So what we want to start thinking about is, why did we do what we did? What led the founding fathers, as flawed as they were, but as brilliant as they were, why did the founding fathers choose the form of government they did? what influenced them to think that way, to do what they did? Okay? I mean, because they were in a somewhat similar situation. Again, breaking away from the British, they could have done anything. Why did they do what they did? All right? And so what we really want to do is begin taking a look at the beginnings of the Constitution. Okay? How did the Constitution, how was it formed? What was their mindset? What were their ideas? What were their goals? Okay? And the first thing we got to think about is, what are the philosophies of government? What are their ideas? I'm going to hide this here at the bottom. There we go. What were their ideas? There are various ideas behind government, right? Philosophies behind government. If you go back to the old days, right, in Europe, you'll find that one of the oldest philosophies and most heavily used was something called divine right. Now, when you see the word divine, especially with a capital D, hopefully, what do you think of? I'll give you a clue. What person do you think of? Begins with a G, 3 letters, big dude in the sky, controls everything. Right? Hopefully God, right? It's the idea that kings and queens have been appointed by God to rule over people. Now, of course, who are the people who are espousing this the most? The kings and the queens, because it benefits and justifies their rule. Okay? Now, keep in mind, this is exactly what the Founding Fathers were fighting against. This is not what they wanted. This is not what they wanted at all. This is what exactly they were fighting against. And instead, they begin to, so here's the thing. If God doesn't want people to be, want one person to be in control, the idea was that the people need to be in control then. And the Founding Fathers began to embrace not a divine right type of philosophy, but instead one centered around the people. Okay? And really this falls into 2 categories then. One, well, and really, I guess if you want to think of it this way, it creates a question. And again, it's the fundamental question. You'll hear us talk about this a lot, and we'll actually have you write about this quite a bit. And that is, how much power should the government have? What should they be able to do, and what should they not be able to do? That's really, and again, for those of you in Rising Scholars, again, you're probably having flashbacks here. But that's the fundamental question that separates the 2 political parties today. What should the government job be? What should they be able to do? So you have a kind of a compromise here. One is Thomas Hobbes. He's a Scottish philosopher who comes up with the idea of the social contract, that the government has a role. They have a job. They are to provide order and security for the people. But in exchange, what that means is that people can't do whatever they want. That's called anarchy. You can't do whatever you want. You don't have that freedom. I mean, anarchy, the good news about anarchy, it's absolute freedom. The bad news is that means no protection for anybody. There's nothing to stop me from grabbing Caden's bag, punching him in the face, and ultimately maybe eating him, killing him, whatever. I can do whatever I want because there's no laws against it. You do it kind of tasty. I know. Yeah. Sorry, that might have been a little far. Kate's like, oh my gosh, that was really awkward. Okay. So there's no law against it. So here's the thing. I don't have the freedom to do that. And why? Because we've created a government that has laws and the power to enforce those laws. In fact, a social contract, there's another word for that. What's an example of a social contract? Begins with a C. It's a constitution. A constitution is a social contract. Okay? But here's the thing. We give up some of our freedoms, but how do we make sure that we don't give up all of our freedom? Because here's the thing. The founding fathers believed that we were, dare I say, to borrow a phrase from one of them, we were endowed with certain inalienable rights. Does this sound familiar to anybody? He says, and by the way, I'm quoting Thomas Jefferson from the Declaration of Independence, we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. He says, among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of Basically what he's doing is he's plagiarizing John Locke. Because John Locke said, we are all born with certain rights, freedoms, that no government can touch. We are born with them. He says life, liberty, and property. Thomas Jefferson changed the property part to life, liberty, of course, and pursuit of happiness. But he's basically plagiarizing John Locke. So where's that balance? How do we make sure we give the government enough power to do what it needs to do, but yet protect our freedoms, our natural law? And this, my friends, is the Constitution. The Constitution gives the government power, but then as soon as they pass that, what did they add on the end? I'll give you a clue. What amendments did they add on the end? What do we call that? The Bill of Rights. And said, yeah, government, here you go. Here's your power, but you can't do this, and this. It's a compromise between these two. Giving the government the power what it needs to do, but protecting the people's rights, their natural law. That's the idea. So what exactly is the purpose or the function of government then? What do they do? What are they supposed to do? What do you think? No cynical answers. So no, like, take money from people, kiss babies, shake hands. Hold on, we'll go Lindsay and then Brady, okay? Hold on real quick.
Keep everything in order.
Okay, good, provide order. Yes, exactly, good.
I was just gonna say like prevent chaos.
Okay, prevent chaos, right? Good. That's exactly what the first one is. Maintain order. You're exactly right. They're the ones that pass laws, and they're the ones that therefore enforce those laws. Okay? So they pass the laws and they enforce those laws, which, by the way, is another interesting thing to think about in our little crash scenario. We have these laws. Who's going to enforce them, though? You know? Do we as a society enforce them? Is one of you, like Brady pointed out, if everybody has a job, is one of them like a cop? And, who does that, One of the more controversial things that governments do is they provide public services. And here's why this is controversial. What do you consider a public service? Where does it stop? Like, for example, we talk about roads and bridges and things like that, which most people are like, okay, yeah, I get that. But where does it stop? Like, for example, should the government, to borrow a more modern example, should the government be responsible for providing health care to all Americans? Should college education be paid for by the government? That one's a little more appropriate for a lot of you, especially looking at you seniors. Okay? What should the role of the government be? What public services should they provide? Is there a limit? If so, where? Because I love having this conversation. Especially like Mr. Hecht. I don't know if you have any classes with him. Super nice guy. Right next door. He's the new social studies teacher. He taught in Germany for like 3-4 years, and he was talking about government and all this other stuff. And people always bring up Germany all the time, and they're like, "Man, wish I could move to Germany. Government's free, or college is free." I'm like, is it though? Here's what the Thor meme. Is it though? Right? Is it? And the answer, no, it's not. Just you don't pay for it. Well, you do, but through what? Taxes. So, as a teacher in Germany, he was making decent money, but here's the thing. He paid 35% in taxes. If he were here in America, it'd be 25%, or actually about 28%. Right? My wife has relatives that live in Germany, and they're definitely upper middle class, probably lower upper class. And they make a pretty good living. But the government takes 55% of their income. Over half of what they earn every year is taken by the government. Now, do they get free? Do they get health care provided for? Yes. Okay. Do they get did their kids get a college education? Sure. But again, saying it's free is a little bit much. So think about it. What should the government do? Would you be in favor of the government providing education for all? With the understanding that it's going to cost your parents and your grandparents, and eventually you, when you get to be older, it's going to cost you, higher taxes. It's not free. Somebody's paying for it. It's just not you. This is a really important one, and it's a contentious one. This is really one of the things that separates the two political parties in America today. What should the government do? What services should they provide? This one's easy. National security. If you attack us, we will attack you right back. If you don't believe me, just ask Japan. Right? Whoopsie daisy. They attacked at Pearl Harbor, and I think we kind of got the final word on that one. Just a little bit.
And then Russia.
Yeah, well, I mean, luckily it never came to that, though, right?
Yeah.
So providing for national security, okay? We are, it's the government's job to protect its citizens, not only domestically, but internationally as well. Okay, they run the military. And last, but certainly not least, it's their job to make economic decisions. How are goods and income, how is it going to be distributed? How do you figure out who gets what? Now, keep in mind that this might be a trick question. Some people will say the best way to answer that question, or the best decision they can make, is to not make a decision at all. In other words, let who decide? The people. Let the people decide. That's the best thing to do in some people's minds. Okay? So one of their jobs is to make economic decisions. Trade, taxes, stuff like that. How do you decide who gets what and how much? Okay, so what are the various kind of types of government here? Right? What are the various types of government? Okay? One is an autocracy. Now, keep in mind when we say auto, we mean kind of one. One person has all the authority. Now, in the old days, it could be a monarchy, like a king or a queen. Today, we still have kings and queens, but the overwhelming majority of them have no power whatsoever. Like, if you ask for my opinion, the best job in the world would be to be the ruler, the king or queen of England. They do nothing, and they get pampered for it.
Nothing?
They do nothing. They have no power whatsoever. All they do is they sit in royal palaces, and they occasionally give it an occasional speech, and then they wave.
Wow.
Yeah, that's it. Okay? Now, the problem with this, though, is that even though there are kings and queens, they don't have any power, that doesn't mean that there are no other kinds of autocracy. The other autocrats, as they are called, not to be confused with Decepticons or Autobots or anything like that, right? We're not talking about Transformers here.
Yeah.
The other autocrats are dictators. People who use the military and rule with an iron fist. Okay? The best example of this is the crazy guy in charge of North Korea named Kim Jong-un. This dude is freaking nuts.
He killed his brother, he killed his aunt, he killed his...
Well, how about this? Not only did he, once he rose to power, he killed his entire family to solidify his power, to make sure that they weren't a threat, scheming and conniving behind his back. In fact, he had his uncle torn apart by dogs. He rules with such an iron fist. Men, there are only 5 state-acceptable haircuts for you to have. 5, that's it. If you have anything other than those 5, you can be killed. Ladies, they're more generous, you can get 12. But they all have to be one of those 12. Okay? He determines how much food you get. He determines what you can hear, what you can see, what you can do, what you're taught. He controls everything. He's an autocrat. Okay? Oligarchy is another one. We talked about this real briefly yesterday. Oligarchy is when a small group holds power. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they were elected, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they are good people. A really good example of this is China. China is an oligarchy, all right? If you know nothing about China, they have very few freedoms. It is illegal in China to be a Christian. Actually, it's illegal in China to be pretty much anything except a Buddhist or practice Confucianism. Confucianism? I think it's it. Okay. President Trump is also blaming them for not opening and not being open enough about how bad the coronavirus really was. We still don't know how many Chinese people were killed by COVID in China. We have no idea because they refused to release the numbers. Had we known, had they been open with the rest of the world, maybe we would have known how bad this was. And we wouldn't have to wear these stupid masks and have these shields and we could actually live a normal life. But we didn't know because China refused to release that information. Okay? There was, for example, there was an anti-government demonstration in 1989 in Beijing, downtown Beijing, at a place called Tiananmen Square. Thousands of people were killed, thousands. And it was all caught on camera. Do you remember this, Mr. Mossman, right? To this day, the Chinese government refuses to acknowledge that it even happened. They have whitewashed it from their history.
What about that guy in that tank?
Tank Man, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. A theocracy, I threw this in there because there is one major country that is still a thorn in our side that practices theocracy. It's Iran. Iran is the world's major theocracy. Their government is based on Sharia Muslim law. Okay? And they take it very seriously to the point where, like, if you get caught stealing something in Iran, they chop off your hand. If you get caught cheating on your wife, they chop. No, I'm just kidding. We won't go that far. But actually, what they do, if you get caught cheating, especially, and ironically, it's really more for women. Technically, according to, if you get caught cheating on your husband, they stone you to death. That's actually Sharia law. It has happened in Iran, but not recently. So, theocracy. It's a government ruled by religion. Okay? And then, by far and away, the most common example of a government in the world is democracy. A rule by the people. People rule. Literally what it means. People rule. As a matter of fact, that's part of the state motto for the state of South Dakota. Under God, the people rule. Now, there are two different kinds of democracy. One is called direct democracy. This is what a lot of you were talking about here in our crash scenario. In a direct democracy, basically think of it this way. One person, one vote. Everybody makes a collective decision. One person, one vote. You get a direct say in what happens. Now, why might that be good? Why might that be beneficial? What's the advantage of a direct democracy? What does it promote? Everybody's what? Everybody's equal. Good, Kaylee, that's right. Everybody's equal. You have just as much power as everybody else. Okay? Now, in a scenario like we talked about where there were 45 people, that's doable. What if it were 45 million? Is direct democracy possible in larger groups? No. Because let's be honest, if you're all making decisions on your own, like collectively, like everybody has to vote on this and this and this and this and this, you have no Congress, you have no president, you guys are all doing everything. Would you have time for anything else? You would only be debating and voting your entire life. Nothing would ever get done. So it's okay on a small scale. By the way, there are absolutely small towns and villages, particularly in the northeastern part of America, Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, small towns, like 200-300 people. They don't have a mayor. They don't have a city council. They just all get together at town hall every week and they vote on stuff and they talk about stuff. Should we fix a pothole on Main Street? All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries, we're going to fix the pothole. Okay. Should we require a leash on dogs at the dog park? All in favor say aye. Opposed, say nay. That's how they do it. And it's possible when you have a town of 200 or 300. Not possible when you have 200,000 or 300,000 or 200 or 300 million like the United States has. Representative democracy, especially a republic, basically is what a representative democracy is. Now you have a You basically vote for people to make decisions on your behalf. In this particular case, who are the major elected officials in the United States? We have two different bodies. Well, one is headed by a person and the other is headed by a group of people. Who are our elected officials? In South Dakota, we have three. Who are they? Now, you don't have to name me who they are, but who are they? Where are they? Begins with a C, capital C. Congress. Congress is a good example here. And then, of course, who else is up for election here in November? The president. Correct. Those are our elected representatives. So we elect these people to make decisions on our behalf, which frees the rest of us up to, actually do stuff, work, play, do whatever, live our lives. We don't have to worry as much about political decisions because they're not ultimately our decisions. We voted for somebody else to make those decisions on our behalf. But what's the disadvantage of that, though? What are the disadvantages of a representative democracy? How much control do you actually have? None. You have no direct control over the situation. What you want to have happen might not happen because you didn't directly vote on it. Okay? Not to mention the fact, think about it this way. What's more likely to happen? Well, I'll tell you this. Let me rephrase. I'm going to rephrase the question. Corruption is more likely to happen. Why? Why is it more likely to have corruption in a representative democracy as opposed to a direct democracy? I'll give you a clue. Think about the number of people involved in each. Direct democracy, hundreds of millions of people versus 500, 600. Who is more easily corrupted? Large groups or small groups? Probably small groups, right? I mean, if I'm a big corporation, I know, hey, all I got to do, if I want the majority, all I got to do is bribe 250 people, and I can get what I want. Right? Good luck bribing 250 million people. Okay? Ooh, hey, how's it going? Man, quit moving this on me. Sorry. Cow. I take back everything I said about you. Darn. Okay, last thing we'll talk about here. Actually, you know what? We're going to pause right there. I lied. We'll pause. So, Monday. Hold on to these, by the way, of course. Monday, what we'll do is we'll catch this up with the economies and how that all takes place. And then we'll begin to take a look at a few other things as far as direct historical influences on the Constitution, including the Declaration of Independence. We'll see what that little document has to say. And then we'll move on and we'll begin to take a look at the Constitution itself, because the Constitution itself will basically form literally the rest of the semester. Okay, when we're looking at the Bill of Rights, we're looking at the branches of government, all that other good stuff.